You don't really care much about the precision. You just want to make the correct decision and have a good direction. The keyword here is direction. If you only consider clicks, you lose all of the other channels which are important. You will never delete a page that brings you revenue just because you don't have Google traffic. Analytics is the opposite, it's boring. You have to make things easy, digestible, simple charts, very simple and stupid charts because they work. They just work.
Buenos dias, señores, señoras. I'm joking, of course. I'm saying that because I'm going to be in Barcelona this week, but welcome to Search with Candour. I am your host, Jack Chambers-Ward, and like I said, I'm going to be in International Search Summit. By the time you've heard this episode, I'll have been to Barcelona and come back again. I'm going to change out of these sunglasses now. I got a bit much, didn't it, I think, but genuinely, I'm very excited for this week's episode because I've got Marco Giordano on the show, and he is one of my favourite people to talk about web data, GA4, BigQuery, and just data analysis in general, because Marco is a super smart guy. I'm a big fan of his newsletter and a lot of the blog posts he's been writing and appearances he's had on other podcasts as well. I followed Marco for a long time. I met him a couple of times in Brighton and we've hung out a couple of times. He's a super lovely guy, and I think you can get a lot out of basically what to do with your web data, what kind of metrics matter, and perhaps most importantly, how to communicate complicated web data and complex ideas to your clients and make the most of it, which I think is something we all struggle with at the end of the day in SEO, right? So stay tuned for my fantastic conversation with Marco Giordano coming up after a word from our sponsors.
If you're not already using or you don't know what AutoAsk is, let me give you 3 reasons you should be using it. Number 1, AutoAsk gives you the intent blueprint directly from Google to help you make the best possible content. You get live pre-clustered searcher questions that are bang up to date, the majority of which aren't available from big keyword research tools. This is for any country or any language that Google supports, and you can quickly download it and export it in graphical or text format. Number 2, AutoAsk's timeline feature shows you when a topic's intent has changed. This lets you know when you need to refresh and update your content, and crucially, what has changed, what people are asking right now. Number 3, AutoAsk's API allows you to integrate with popular tools like Screaming Frog and ChatGPT to automate tasks like content gap discovery. Set it up with Screaming Frog and you can press a button to get a list of questions your content misses on every single URL. You can try AutoAsk for free right now. Just go and put a search term in the box. Everybody gets 90 searches per month for free. You don't even need an account. If you do want to sign up, you can cancel at any time with a monthly account, or if you do want to commit to an annual account, you'll get an additional 20% off. If you're still unsure, check out some of the brilliant case studies and guides below this video.
A huge thank you to SE Ranking for sponsoring this week's episode of Search with Candour. SE Ranking is the company behind the powerful and intuitive SEO platform trusted by millions of agencies, businesses, and SEO professionals since 2013. With a robust toolkit, SE Ranking empowers SEO professionals around the world to excel at executing their strategies. Key features include the Rank Tracker, which provides accurate and up-to-date keyword rankings, as well as the competitive and keyword research tools that offer deep insights into market trends and competitor strategies. The platform's AI-powered SEO insights leverage advanced machine learning to deliver actionable recommendations, streamlining the process and letting you outrank your competition. The backlink checker and monitoring tool enables you to analyze backlink profiles and monitor their status, ensuring you've got a very healthy link building strategy. SE Ranking have launched their AI Overviews tracking feature. It's a brand new tool that allows you to track AI search engine snippet that will help you see how you stack up against your competitors in Google's AI enhanced search features. The tool supports you in identifying your rivals in the snippets, analyzing their content, and detecting new opportunities for strategic decisions. Click the link in the video description down below or in the show notes if you're listening to this episode. And a huge thank you to SE Ranking for sponsoring us here at Search with Candour. My guest this week is a freelance web data analyst. He literally wrote the book on analytics for SEO and has done an analytics SEO course as well. He has spoken at Brighton SEO. I have seen him speak at Brighton SEO. I met him at Brighton SEO at time of recording, which was like last week, by the way. And he lives by 3 very important values. Don't do more than necessary, overwhelm your opponent, and the best offense is a good defense. Other way around. The best defense is a good offense. Welcome to the show, Marco Giordano.
Thank you, Jack, for having me. I'm really, happy to be here today and to speak with you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on. I know, as I said, we were literally hanging out together a week ago at time of recording at Brighton SEO. So it's a very quick turnaround. I really appreciate you coming on because I find what you specialize in and what you talked about at Brighton so fascinating because it's something
Thank you.
I've kind of dipped my toes into a little bit, but it is definitely not my area of expertise. So I'm looking forward to basically picking your brains and getting ideas and recommendations from you about how businesses should be managing their web data, storing their web data, and how us as SEOs, marketing professionals, data analysts, how we should be then communicating that to our clients and businesses, right? It's going to be a big topic, but I'm excited to get into it with you.
Sure. So, in the first thing I want to say, the very first thing is that usually there should be a difference between SEO or what you do in web analytics. And they usually talk about it. In SEO, people are usually more concerned, which is good, by the way, with Search Console data and GA4, especially if you do e-commerce, SaaS. Otherwise, how are you able to measure conversions or events? No? And so on, which is good. In web analytics, what I often see lacking is GSC or other data. They usually focus on Google tools, but only GA4, GTM, rarely on the plethora of tools that we have in SEO, which is, in my opinion, bad. So SEO from this point, if you're an SEO and you're listening to this, you already have some advantage, you already have some familiarity with some words, some terms. For example, what is a log file? What is crawl data? No, which is extremely useful. What we miss in SEO, in the SEO industry, what is missed is often this management side and also the common sense of understanding what you need. For example, a common mistake I see, and I often correct, especially in dashboards, most likely dashboards, is about the average position or how people, overestimate the position and think it's a good metric. It's like the ultimate indicator of success. Unfortunately, it's not. But for many reasons, the SEO reason that someone like Mark will tell you is that, of course, the ranking alone does not bear any weight in terms of money. This is the business logic. From a technical perspective, it's also true that first it's an average, so it depends how you are calculating it. Did you filter by country? Did you filter by device? Did you filter by the search type to make it more accurate and reliable? And then also how Google is scoring this position. Because you may be average position 13 and have a knowledge panel. Is it bad? No, it's good actually. It's not a bad thing to have. So I usually look at the CTR instead. This is just one quick example that shows you that first, one data source is not enough usually. And second, a lot of people should really focus on the definitions, on the logic behind the metrics and not just on the data coding. Because I see that from 2019, because that's when I started being active, not writing online, but being active. I started in 2017, December 2017. Then I discovered about technology, Python, this stuff around 2019, I think, which is the period where Python in SEO and this stuff was getting more popular, was getting starting to get traction because I was there. And I think that now the trend is different, much different, also in the analytics world, in the data world, because the expectations have lowered. So now we're more realistic. We're used to AI, which is a great thing. For writing code, it's very good, at least in my opinion, and because I use it daily. But also for different reasons, mostly stakeholders. Because when I was studying in college, I recall that data, if you check the previous LinkedIn post by influencers or by people back then, Even in SEO, it's the same. The trend was big data, coding, learn coding. Now it's completely different. Now, if you open LinkedIn, people will tell you the opposite. They will tell you learn soft skills. Don't focus too much on the hard skills. And it's the same for SEO, to be honest, or marketing. I think there should be more focus on domain knowledge. So how you can use SEO knowledge with data, which is SEO in the end, rather than the actual I need to learn coding, I need to learn this, I need to learn that. It's more about the processes and the logic that you imprint.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because from my perspective as an SEO, like you're totally right. We focus on kind of the small things, just worrying about just the clicks or just the position, or like you said, ranking being a very like wishy-washy actual metric that doesn't actually drive money at the end of the day. And I think from the other side of things, businesses will basically just pay attention to the money side of things. And I think there's a lot of clashing there between, like, take an SEO agency reporting to a client and then not actually aligning those KPIs and those metrics, right? And I think that's where you were saying, like, bringing that stuff together and uniting the important bits.
Yes.
So we're all talking about the same thing and we're all agreed on the same thing, is where that relationship can really grow and get better, and we can all take the same analysis and understand the same things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it. In practice, it's all about that. It's about the logic and communicating with people, which, in my opinion, is I understand why people don't focus on that. Because when I was in university some years ago, usually when you study or when you have to learn something new, even if you just started working, you don't care about the soft skills. You just care about no, it's true. You care about
Yeah, absolutely.
learning the hard job, the actual skills. Once you learn it, once you are able to do the actual job, only later you think about soft skills. You're like, I have to sell this to this stakeholder. I have to convince them. And then you start changing mindset. You think like a leader, we can say a manager, if you want to call it like that. So there is this mindset shift that at some time takes place. And it's so hard to explain it to people, because I usually have calls or I usually talk to people that tell me, but Marco, do I need coding to do this? Do I need that? And my answer is, if you think about the hard skills, I mean, of course, you have to do the basic stuff. If it's your job, you need to do it. But at some point, there is no more gain. There are no more gains. You will not gain much in terms of value, but also salary, to be honest, by learning to be more technical. Because that's not what it's required in many cases. You can have a degree in engineering, whatever, you can be the best one. But if you don't use that knowledge, if your job does not require it, it means you need to learn something
All things
else.
frozen.
That's how it works usually. If you're a freelance, if you're an agency, it's the same thing.
My internet that's going down.
Jack?
Oh, great. Yeah, the whole internet's gone. Brilliant.
Jack?
Huh. What? There we go.
It lagged like 20 seconds ago.
Yeah, I think it was my end of things. My whole computer like freaked out.
No, because
my connection.
Yeah, my Google was I was Googling just to verify the connection. It was working. Let me know when we can continue, because I think
Yeah, let me just double check on my end of things as well. Let me have a look. Because I'm the only person in the office, so it should be fine. Like, I'm back up. I'm connected. I'm all good. Cool.
Wait. Let me know when I can start again so you can cut. You can do the cut.
I'll edit that, mate. Yeah, don't. Of course.
I was saying, if you are a freelance, if you work for a company, it doesn't matter. It's true that at some point you need some soft skills. I don't like the word soft skills, because they sound like they sound like bullshit. It's like, soft skills. Maybe you need them, but it's not true. I mean something like abstraction, like how to abstract a concept, processes as well, like how to define a process, how can we define a workflow, how can we improve it. Topics like this that they sound easy, are actually very complex because they're not well defined. There is no roadmap. How to abstract something, it's very, how can I say, abstract knowledge. It's very generic if you don't have never done it, if you have no experience with these type of tasks. And this is what I usually recommend, especially in SEO, because compared to other channels, to other industries, if you may, like PPC, SEO is, in my opinion, not in my opinion, it's harder to estimate. It's quite hard, especially in terms of forecasting compared to PPC. And not only that, I usually see a lot of complex solutions that are super complex, and I'm like, but in actual companies, if you are a data professional, which is the people doing this job, not SEOs or marketers, usually it's these people, no one will ever implement some solutions or deploy them because they're too complex to manage and they cost too much money. This is also another aspect to consider because I usually see marketers, but this is common, overcomplicate simple things, make them look impossible, but then in practice, the job of a data professional is to make them easy, simple. We do the opposite. We're like, why are you doing this? Isn't there an easier way to achieve the same result? This it's all about cost savings.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, taking a very complex thing, something that will seem very easy at first, I think can become very complex and very quickly spin out of control when you're having these kind of conversations. And the opposite side of it, building on what you're saying about the hard skills versus soft skills thing, I think there's a lot of kind of, like you said, the shift towards the industry. I've definitely gone through this in my career. Like, I have a physics degree and now I basically talk on a microphone for a living. So it's like from very hard science to very soft, I basically have conversations with people for my job. I still do, obviously, SEO stuff and still work with clients and things like that. But I'm definitely, I think most people would see me as very much a soft skills kind of guy rather than a technical kind of guy. And I would agree with that. And I think there are also like a lot of people who will neglect, as you said, neglect the soft skills and kind of focus on all the technical stuff. They're doing brilliant work. They really know, the data they're looking at, the tools they're using, all that kind of stuff. But then can't communicate that to their managers, the stakeholders, the clients, whatever. And you have the opposite where people can talk the talk but can't walk the walk. I can talk all about SEO, but I don't actually know how to do all this data. I can talk about the data. I can talk about GA4 or Search Console, but I don't actually know how to use it properly. And I think having a balance in your career there is really, really important. From my experience, going from a physics degree, an astrophysics degree, to now podcasting and doing a bit of SEO as well.
I completely agree, but strange because a lot of people with a degree in physics usually work for banks or do econometrics. These hard stuff,
True, yeah. That was one of the career prospects. I remember having a conversation at university, like you said, many years ago now, and they were like, right, you're going to be a programmer or you're going to work in accounting and all that kind of stuff. And neither of those things particularly. We did a bit of C++ and C# for physics modeling and stuff like that at university, but I never really fell in love with programming in the way that I did with a lot of the creative stuff. And I was also doing a podcast at the time. That's when I first got into podcasting, and that's where my life has gone since, I guess. But we're not here to talk about my career. That's not important. We're going to talk about some web data and basically, like I said, how to get into the details, do it right, get a workflow that works for you, for your clients, whether you're working in SEO, whether you're working in marketing, and you're working with other data analysts as well. And you mentioned something there, Marco, common mistakes that SEOs make. Are there common mistakes from the other side of things that you think the businesses and the clients are making when it comes to kind of their understanding of web data as well?
But I can write a book on that, but
we've got a whole other podcast to
do. But in practice, it's very simple. First of all, error number one, not storing web data. This is super common because they store every data. Usually people are afraid of accounting, no? Because those are needed. They store all financial data because, of course, for legal reasons and also because it's accounting data. Come on. Financial data they always have. Web data they never care. And then they complain to you they cannot do the year-over-year report because, as you know, both Search Console and GA4 are not really suitable for this kind of stuff. Search Console is limited in 16 months. GA4 is also limited in terms of explorations, though, because usually explorations are what allow you to be more free. But still, even the standard reports are not that good. I would not use them. So you are forced to use BigQuery now. Google is forcing us to use BigQuery or the API, but the GA4 API is also affected by quota limits. So the idea is always the same: use BigQuery. It's not that expensive. This is what many get wrong. They don't store their web data. They have hacky solutions in place, very hacky solutions that don't actually solve the problem. Google, for once, at once, did something good. Let's use it. Let's put it. Let's valorize it. It's actually good what they did for both GA4 and GSC and even Google Ads. I mean, it's good, so it can be used. And this is error number one. The error number two is what I told you before. Using random metrics. I see a lot of dashboards that use Ahrefs data, SEMrush data, which is quite expensive from the API. Like, you have to sell your own house to build such reports because they are super, super expensive, super expensive. And the business value is low because I asked them, you have Search Console. You have a website with, I don't know, 1 million users per month. You do have a lot of queries in Search Console as well, even if you have never opened it. Just by looking at GA4 and at your organic traffic, I am deducing the GSC is also big. Then we verify this true. And most companies don't use Search Console. Can you believe that? A lot of companies only use GA4, and they think, in my theory is that it's a naming issue. You know why? Because analytics sounds like, yeah, this tool is for web analytics. We use it. Search Console, how they sell it, looks like, I need to upload a sitemap. Let's check this technical stuff no one cares about. It's not true at all, but many companies I've spoken to think like that. They're like, yes, maybe you have Search Console, especially corporations. Sometimes they don't even have Search Console, They don't even set it up at all. It happened. I've seen such cases, or people, I've talked to people, even publishers, big publishers telling me, Search Console. No, we use the interface. We don't even use the API. And how do you find topics? I know. I just look at the news, or we just ask people, which is in my opinion, it's a great idea if you are that good in content, but it's not, you know, it's not how you do reporting, it's not how you create a workflow, it's not how you manage a company. If you are based on the opinions on people, this is good for brainstorming, for abstraction, for finding new ideas. This is great. I like this unstructured approach. But if you want to have a process, if you want to have something more solid, you need a structured approach. And this is a very common mistake. And I'm talking about US and UK. I'm not talking about less developed country in terms of marketing, because, for example, continental Europe, it's a fact, has a weaker marketing culture compared to the Anglosphere, to the US, UK, because these are the business marketing countries compared to, say, Germany, Italy. And they've seen the same problem across, multiple regions, multiple area. The third error that people always ask me, like every single call, it's always accuracy and the precision of data. There's an important distinction to make. If you are handling with transactions, if you're selling a product, data must be accurate. Of course, it cannot be wrong. If I'm selling you a pen for £1, the value should be correct, 100% correct. But if I tell you, look, Jack, this page has 20 20 users, do you actually care if it's 21 or 20? Like, I ask you, what is the value of this additional information I'm giving you? Is this that important? Usually not. If you have a big discrepancy, it is important. If the difference is 20 against 20K, it is a big important difference. But in most cases, for decision making, which is the goal of everything, of analytics, making decisions that are reasonable, you don't care. That's what I usually tell people. Agency people in particular are usually obsessed with the accuracy of data because clients are asking them. They're like, but this number is not correct. I get 25. Here I get 27. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I agree. But you have to complain with Google engines. It's not something we practitioners can change. No, it does not depend on us. We have to cope with it. We have to find an alternative. We have to play around it. But in general, does not affect your decision making. This is what I mean. You should, with analytical data, how you want to call them, with this type of data, you don't really care much about the precision. You just want to make the correct decision and have a good direction. The keyword here is direction, the right course of action, because in the end, a strategy is a course of action. You want to have the right course of action, make reasonable decisions that make you closer to the goal. And usually, GA4, GSC, you don't care much about the stuff or the small details. This is where companies and people struggle. They focus too much on the details, on tag manager, which is important. But in web analytics, if you see the conferences, they only talk about tag manager. I'm not joking. It's incredible. I'm always about. It's like it's the equivalent of e-commerce filters or schema markup in SEO. There is always someone talking about them. They are important topics, of course. You need to know e-commerce filters. I'm not saying you don't need to know them. But at the same time, they are saturated because, we need more variety, and usually companies don't struggle for tag manager. I mean, yeah, they do. But it's not why they don't make money with data. Tag manager is not the root cause. The root cause is the logic, the business, the processes, and how they handle the process.
Yeah, I think that the accuracy of data, like you said, that conversation with clients, I'm sure everyone who has ever worked with a client and reported to anybody has had that conversation of, mine says 25, mine says 21, and that tiny little discrepancies. I was literally having a conversation about this with a client like earlier this week, where again it was talking about particular visits from GA4, so about users versus sessions, and then they had a slightly different version. And when it comes to things like GA4, you've got all of the different attribution models. You need to be aware of where you're getting your attribution from. Are you first, last? Are you using the blended model that is now default in GA4? Are you aware of like what benchmarking and filtering you've got as default? Is it benchmarking your data and not giving you the full picture? And then people really, really, like you said, focus on those little, but it's 100 clicks down from 50,000. Like, so who cares? Like that's pretty close. Like you said, if it's 90% different, then that makes a huge difference, and you should definitely care about that. But I think you're totally right when it comes to these broader trends and these broader ideas. Having that ability to kind of zoom out and have that bigger picture thing, for me, has always been a good way of then kind of translating that to the client and be like, don't worry about that specific click on that specific URL. You've got an entire site here that is up, 80% year on year or 60% year on year, whatever it is. And having those discussions of, you can then filter down into, okay, these pages are doing well, but then categorizing them and understanding the blog posts are doing well, or the product categories are doing well, or whatever particular product category is doing well. For me, that's where you find that balance of getting the bigger picture and not focusing on the individual little bits of data too much, right? Am I along the right sort of lines, Marco? You seem to be nodding along, thankfully.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Speaking of which, you talked about labeling, grouping the pages, and usually a recommendation is to have these tags or categories either in your CMS or in your content planner table, and then you match the tables. Usually I like to label pages, and I recommend everyone to do it from scratch, so you don't need to pay someone later.
Definitely a good idea. Yeah, I think it's important stuff, like understanding, especially for e-commerce stuff. I've had this really, really useful conversations where particular products will be working well, and then another range of products has gone down for whatever reason. And then when you are able to easily identify that particular category as the one that is making the contribution to that change, you can then infer things like, oh, well, that product is now out of season, whereas this product is trending because, I don't know, some influencer talked about it on TikTok or whatever it is. Like all the little bits and pieces that then influence that categorization then allows you to make those, like you said, those data-driven decisions that actually matter and make a difference, right? And then you can actually improve those things by understanding what's working and what's not working, rather than, oh, this one specific product has lost £5 or whatever it is, whereas an entire product category is
Yeah.
making lots more money. And for me, that's where you mentioned BigQuery. I think that's going to be a big topic of this episode, talking about BigQuery, where you can combine all of that stuff. And this has been a real kind of from your talk, from the posts I see you post on LinkedIn and things like that, following you guys, and what so many other people are talking about with BigQuery stuff. I know I talked with Dana Di Tommaso about using that and combined with GA4 a few months ago as well, where you can get Search Console and GA4 data aligned with each other and understanding, because so often you'll report one and then report the other, and again you'll get a client going, oh, how come the clicks are different to the users or the difference to the sessions or whatever. But when you can unite those URLs and see, you know, clicks versus revenue versus queries versus and all that stuff together, I think that paints such a better, more complete picture of a website, of a domain, than looking at them individually and kind of worrying about, like you said, individual bits and pieces, right?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I have a very traditional data analytics approach, because I don't know how to explain it, but web analytics to me, when I even define myself a web analyst, looks like a different industry, because it's like SEO and marketing. I mean, SEO, we can discuss. Product marketing is still part of search engine marketing. This is objective. So it is still partially marketing, but it feels different from marketing, no? Like it's half and half, gray area. I think the web analytics is the same, because if you study pure analytics, the purest one, if you come from business, if you come from finance, it's completely different. Web analytics is much more tracking rather than analytics, and that's why my content is more focused on analysis, on actual analytics, not just tracking and tagging, because there are 1 billion people offering these services. I would have no way of differentiating myself or adding value. It's true. Usually, my approach is that people don't have to know these details. Your final users don't have to know the details. You just have to simplify it to present the conclusion. For example, if I have to report on pages, if I have to give them recommendations, they don't need to know what is a click, what is a user. They just need to understand why it matters. For example, I combine the two tables. I have to do a content audit, let's say. I tell them, look, this metric tells you how many people come from Google. We agree? This other one, it's a general, like users without filtering it. It's just an indicator of the total traffic without going too much into detail. What is a user, what is a session? They don't care. For this reason, the outcome is that if you only consider clicks, you lose all of the other channels which are important. You will never delete a page that brings you revenue just because you don't have Google traffic or you have low Google traffic. But it happens. It happened in the past.
Yeah.
It's quite common. And this is a very simple example. I don't try to explain them all the details, because we have to think like managers or like C-level people. In their day, they don't really care about learning Search Console and GA4, in my opinion. They just want the digested solution, the final solution. They just want to know, they want to be told what to do or what is needed, the resources. And usually, when you combine GSC and GA4, the cool stuff is that you get the events, the custom events, the custom dimensions, whatever. You combine them with your pages, and you can make some very good analysis that are more tangible, especially in SaaS, in e-commerce, most likely e-commerce, because in e-commerce you have a whole area in BigQuery dedicated to your items, dedicated to that. And you can also, track the process. For example, how many people are stopping at the event, I don't know, view, how many people add to cart. And this is the usual funnel analysis and so on. It's quite useful, standard, but effective. And the rest for content auditing, mostly custom events. They are very useful. Custom events. So if they compile a form, what are they doing on the page? But also custom dimensions. I told you, if you want to label pages, you can also create custom dimensions. It's quite subjective. It depends on how you want to do it. You don't need custom dimensions. You may also tag pages in your CMS, export this data, having them as master data, and join them. You have many options. The important is that you never show something too specific, something too unprocessed to the final user. The only bad thing is that you cannot combine GSC queries with GA4 because GA4 does not have queries and you are not able to attribute the revenue of each keyword. How do you know? You don't know. You have to make a guess, a wrong guess, where you say, let's assume every query is equal, which is wrong. We know from SEO, this is one of those cases where you don't need to be a technical person. You have domain knowledge. You have domain knowledge in SEO, and as an SEO professional, you know that keywords are different. Like there are money keywords and there are vanity keywords. So you cannot say they're all equal. Everything matters. They don't. Only a minority of keywords bring you money compared to the whole array of keywords. And this is an important distinction to make.
Yeah, I think, and on the other side of it as well, I think so many SEOs focus on this has high search volume, therefore it's a better keyword thing. And thankfully, I think the industry, as you said earlier, is evolving past that for the most part, at least the people that are doing SEO in the right way, more towards the clear idea of like search intent and the relevance to the user and all that kind of stuff. I think intent and relevance have become a big talking points for so many SEOs when it comes to queries and keywords and things like that. But having that analysis where you can, like you said, understand where the money is coming from, I think is hugely important. And that is where you can take something like, essentially, like you said, like a vanity metric like rankings, and actually say, well, actually, the fact that we rank for this specific keyword, there is a clear purchase intent, transactional intent behind this kind of thing. So we can then understand why people are buying our products and why we're doing so well, why that is driving the money compared to an informational keyword that people are finding our knowledge hub or our blog posts about and stuff like that. There's that balance for me, especially when it comes to e-commerce. I know we've talked about that quite a lot. Like you said, where you can categorize stuff and understand things. And I really appreciate how we can kind of better understand the search intent nowadays compared to how, like I said, so many people did 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, and how you kind of need to balance it a little bit. And I think too many people focus on just transactional stuff for e-commerce and then don't provide informational stuff, and then vice versa. And I think having that balance is important. But like you said, which ones are driving traffic is not necessarily the ones that are also driving the money and bringing the revenue in at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's why it's an important distinction. I think, as you said, and as I said before, the industry is evolving in general, marketing as a whole. But there is an important distinction to make that no one in this podcast, I think, will make, but I will. Because most of your guests, I think, usually they work in the UK or in the US. But as an outsider, because I work with global brands, I can tell you that in other countries, the industry is not as advanced as in the UK or in the US. This is an important, or in Canada. This is an important distinction because people are like, no one is doing that anymore. Come to Europe, come to some countries, check some agencies, you tell me. But usually you're lucky because in the UK, US, there is so much more sophistication. There are conferences, there are events, and even maybe, if you don't like the topics, even so, the fact that you have big meetings of people, the professionals that can meet, means there is more, progress compared to other countries where there are no conferences, or maybe there are, but they are split into cliques, into groups. So I think that usually if you work with the US, UK, or in English in general, you are way above the others also for the amount of information you have available in English compared to other languages, which is very good. And that's why I think marketing is evolving this fast, because we have one common language, it's easier to communicate. I don't need to learn German or vice versa. It's easier to communicate in English, no? And to share information to the other people.
Yeah, English is definitely, for better or worse, kind of become the language of the internet, and very much because marketing is so digital these days, as much as we still have a handful of newspapers and stuff, I guess. But the vast majority of marketing is now online using technology and things like that. And you're totally right. I think it is a topic that's come up. We've kind of discussed a lot of the like cultural impacts when we're talking about the intent of keywords there being a perfect example of how much that can change. I did a recent episode with Maria Scheibengraf talking about how just translating a keyword directly from one language to another can completely change its meaning,
Yeah.
and you'll suddenly be like,
Yeah.
you translate this English thing into Spanish, and suddenly it's very offensive, and then the other way
Yeah.
around, or the little nuances that matter there. And for me, those little nuances when it comes to the data side of things and understanding where the bits and pieces are coming from. I know you mentioned crawl data and log files earlier as well. We haven't really touched on that yet and how that kind of ties into the bigger picture of things. Are you integrating that into the BigQuery side of things as well and bringing that kind of understanding of the structure of the site along with the GA4 and GSE data as well?
If they can, it depends on the client. If they can, yes. Crawl data is easy. The problem is log files, because I've never got my hands on good log files. Usually pieces,
It's always
bits.
a battle, isn't it?
Yeah, for legal reasons, or maybe you know why, because the server is not configured to store data after 1 month. It can be. It happened to me. I asked them for the log files. Yeah, we only have the last week. Why? Legal reasons, or we forgot. I don't know. And they just
one or
send
the
you.
other.
Yeah. Plus, they are also, log files are big. They are not small files. So they're usually quite big, unfortunately, and this is also a problem. Usually, crawl data is easy to integrate. It's very easy. You just need a process to refresh them, because crawl data usually change over time. But also CMS data, it all depends on the process. But this is not. I want to say to the SEOs or other people listening, you have to give the instructions. You don't need to do it yourself. Most of this is engineering, which is different. It's a different job. And this is good news for you. Actually, you don't have to actually do it, because some stuff, of course, I need to know what to do, but not how to do it, because it's not part of my job, of course. Other stuff you need to do it yourself. Analysis, in my opinion, you should do it yourself. But deployment, software engineering is completely different mindset, principles. For example, agile. Agile can be applied to some processes. But if you do research, I mean, research is the enemy of agile. There are completely different approaches and mindsets. But for some jobs and for some processes, agile is good, or Scrum. It makes sense. For what I do, not so much, because it's the complete opposite. There are cases where maybe yes, but this is an important distinction to make. Crawl data, I usually recommend, because you get a number of internal links, plus you get some nice technical data, which is also always good to have. And you can also use crawl data to infer categories. Of course you can. You can pretty much do a lot of stuff with Screaming Frog on a VPS, but even Sitebulb, whichever provider you want, just to be neutral. You can pick whichever you prefer, as long as you have internal links data, technical data. Can this page be indexed? Stuff like this can also be valuable. You don't care about non-indexable page if the goal is an SEO analysis. If you are analyzing stuff in terms of SEO, you need this distinction to split between the two. So you can do a lot of stuff with crawl data, to be honest. It's one of my favorite DLC, one of my favorite add-ons to have. One of my favorite additions. It's quite nice. Log files, I told you. Log files, it's not like I integrate them with this other data. I don't. Also because it's so rare to get your hands on them. I think log files is one of the few cases where you can actually have them alone and check things yourself. But in some cases, you may want to combine the sources. But they are so fragmented and so rare to find that even log files alone unlock a lot of insights, because usually you want to see Google bots, no, their behavior. But of course, do as you can. If you can do more, you are my guest. You can do what you want, but usually it's rare. I talk about the frequency, the opportunities you have to play with such data. I would say, instead of chasing log files, because it's very hard to get them, you should focus on having plans, additional data, master data, how you prefer to call them. For example, Airtable, which I guess you know. Airtable is quite big for publishers or for people storing content plans. For example, there is Graydot.co, Canadian agency, you know them, of course. They have this article on this keyword matrix, which I completely approve, I completely agree, because I do the same, where you store your keywords or you store your content plans, and you're able to create this content plan. Instead of using Google Sheets or Excel, because spreadsheets are for calculations, they are not for storing data or for offering the same user experience, to be honest. You're able to join this data, for example, the cluster data, and bring more valuable analysis. Usually, you never check pages one by one. Like, good luck if you have 40K pages. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
not.
some websites have 1 million pages. Like that would be,
Yeah,
you would spend 3 whole weeks of your full-time job just looking at pages
yeah,
one by one by one.
yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, 3 weeks. It depends how much you work, because if you take, it's still a lot. Usually, you want these clusters and analyze the performance by cluster. For example, if you're a publisher, what is the performance of the, I don't know, of the Indonesia cluster if you're a travel publisher compared to the Philippines? Now, it's faster to see where you have problems. And then you can use other approaches. And this approach is very common, where you split pages or clusters by performance: top performance, worst performance, based on the performance metrics, traffic, revenue, whatever. So, usually, you want to do this exercise, and this exercise is manual work. You can automate it, I told you. You can have custom dimensions, you can have whatever you want. Usually, there is manual work involved, or there is people involved in deciding how to do it, because it's important. You need to know how to do this and how to group pages. Otherwise, your analysis will always be very too much high level, too much, specific, or too much high level, depending on how you do them. To find the balance, you need to have the cluster data, proper cluster data, and of course, go in detail where it's needed. That's why you need performance metrics. That's why I recommend joining with GA4, so that you have revenue, you have additional information.
Yeah, definitely. I want to pick up on something you mentioned just there, where it was the importance of crawl data. And I know you mentioned how useful a lot of this stuff could be for content auditing. And I saw an example. It was a new client of ours who had a content audit from a previous agency they'd worked with. And I looked at it and I was like, that number of pages doesn't look right for the kind of, you've been producing
Yeah.
content for like nearly 10 years at this point. And I was like, that looks weird. And the colleague who was working on the account was like, does this make sense? I was like, no, it doesn't add up. They had just like exported straight from Search Console without doing a crawl. And I was like, the number of pages definitely doesn't add up. And we did like, we didn't have CMS access. So we were like, okay, let's get a rough idea with the site search, like do the site operator. Like, okay, that's a very, very rough estimate. And then we crawled. We went through. I think I was doing Screaming Frog. My colleague was using SiteBulb, again, to be neutral. We do use both here at Candour.
Yeah.
not to play favorites. We love them both. And there was that element, like you said, where you suddenly realize, like, oh, there are a bunch of pages that they have not found for whatever reason because of limits in GSE. They hit the 1,000 line limit and then couldn't find anything else after that. And I was like, right, but you have like 15,000 pages. So what was the plan here? And it was a fascinating thing that I kind of had taken for granted, that you would include crawl data and, like you said, line that up using something like Airtable, or if you want to use, pivot tables in Sheets or whatever it is, align all that stuff together so you get the full list of URLs and their performance, and then you can start clustering and categorizing and stuff like that. I think where a lot of people see that separation between, the content stuff that is so much of the creative side of things. That's the writing, that's the keyword, that's all that kind of stuff. That is separate from technical. And I think really you need to have it a bit more combined. Like you said, if something is an index, that will give you some more context of why it's not performing. And I've had indexing issues with clients in the past where we have essentially battled to try and get them down from, I think they were like 2 or 3 months wait for indexing at first because they'd had issues in the past. And now they get indexed within a couple of days or a week or so. I was like, that is such a big difference when it comes to content creation, combining the technical side of things and the content side of things.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't pay attention to one, you don't even know, like you said earlier, that might be where the source of the problem is. And if you don't have the data to find that source, then you might be misdiagnosing or misunderstanding it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also because, as I told you before, analytics, and this is an important distinction, is not about technical skill. You need them, but it's mostly about this abstraction, this logic, the process, because the word analysis, and of course analytics as well, comes from the Greek analysis, which means dissolving something into essential components, which is simplifying. This simplification is often missing. This is the issue. When you see some crazy, super cool SEO stuff with data, they make it even more complex. You start with data, you're like, how did you get there? It's more complex than the initial situation. Usually, people don't like it because it's not like AI. It's not cool like AI. Because AI tries to make things more complex, impossible. Analytics is the opposite. It's boring. You have to make things easy, digestible, simple charts, very simple and stupid charts because they work. They just work. And this is something you understand later in your career, but it's the same in SEO, to be honest. In SEO, back when I started, years ago, when I was doing SEO back then, like until some months ago, to be honest, the thing is that 3-4 years ago, I was studying all semantic SEO, all of this stuff, even the patents. I mean, it's nice trivia. You can tell at parties. Why not?
go to a conference, impress your friends.
But like Mark says multiple times, we cannot deny that some things are working in reality. If we are honest, purely honest, we cannot deny that links don't work because there is a measurable impact, whether you like it or not. And this is an important thing to notice because a lot of theory, a lot of stuff does not reflect reality or does not always have practical applications. It's the same with theoretical physics or with mathematics. You will never use in industry a lot of that knowledge. It's the same in engineering, it's the same if you do data. One of the things I studied back then in university that helped me a lot, I was reading American people, professionals, because back then, of course, they were the only ones talking about these topics, telling students, avoid learning deep learning or machine learning if you're a student, if you're new to the game and you want to be an analyst, because no company is using them. They have simpler problems. And this was great advice. This was the best advice I've got in my life because now we see it every day that companies have actually easier problems to solve that are related to governance, to understanding the business. And we don't have enough people. We have too many people working on the technical stuff, even in web, tag manager, GA4, but no one is telling you how to use this data. No one is telling you what does it mean in practice for you as an SEO, because it's mostly a problem for you as a practitioner, because we have to explain you what it means for you as an SEO or a marketer, how you can use this data, what does it mean, and which analysis you can do. And then you tell us what you can, of course, what you can do in practice. I have a much more proactive approach. I think that it's the other way around. We analyze the data, we should also be domain experts. I believe in the hybrid approach. I am against labels. I don't really believe in labels in 2024 because roles are changing. Like words, keywords, buzzwords like manager and engineer are used for any job. What is a sales engineer? Do you have a degree in engineering? Like, what is, or even the difference between lead and manager? There is a difference between lead and manager, but I know companies where lead means manager and manager means lead. So don't stick too much to the titles. In my opinion, it's not important. I believe more in this concept of being fluid, that you should be able to do more things. If you're an SEO, you don't need to be a CRO specialist, but you need to know enough to provide good value. No, not to suck at it. You should be good, decent enough. I'm not an expert in CRO. I just know how not to make mistakes or to avoid disasters. This is what I mean. I believe in this approach where you're a hybrid and you are able to avoid being stuck to a label and thinking, no, I'm an SEO. This is not what I know. This is not my competence. Where you're a little bit more flexible and you're able to understand different channels. And that's why I prefer, instead of SEO, I prefer inbound or organic, which is more generic, because organic can also be social. Social is also organic. A lot of stuff can be organic and not just purely SEO. And I think that's more value. I want to know your opinion on this, because I think this is an interesting, question to bounce back as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think weirdly enough, that ties into, there's definitely been a theme of the conversations I've been having this year on the podcast where more SEO people need to start thinking outside of just SEO, not siloing it, not just focusing on one little bit. Whether that comes to, like you said, the way we're understanding keywords, the way we're communicating with people, when it comes down to job titles or your skill set specifically, I totally agree with you that you need to be able to have at least a basic understanding of the important other principles. Like, I know there's a big conversation that's been happening over the last couple of years, quote unquote, combining SEO and UX into like SXO or something, trying to find some new 3-letter catchy phrase for it. But I think having a basic understanding, like you said, CRO and analytics and UX and SEO and social and all this kind of stuff, even paid, and understanding how the paid side of things works helps you have those conversations with the rest of your team or the agency you're working with if you're in-house, or the stakeholders or whatever it is. Just having that basic knowledge in multiple areas, you can then contribute more effectively to those conversations rather than, hello, I'm just doing SEO and I have no idea what you're talking about and I have no idea what you're talking about, but let's all listen to me for a bit so you can understand me. If you have, like you said, you don't need to be I'm not expecting you to go and get degrees in everything, but having a rough idea and having a bit of a generalization, but also having your specialist area, I think is very important as well, where you can have those kind of things and understand the basics of when you're talking to a designer about UX, you can contribute to that conversation meaningfully rather than, but that doesn't work for SEO. There was an example correct. I was talking about the other day with one of our designers here, funnily enough, and there was like the different menus across the top in the main navigation, and was the conversation between what will actually fit on the menu with the how many pixels that they have left, and the actual word that should be used according to keywords. Like, oh, this product category should be called, I don't know, jackets, for example. But actually they had called it coats/jackets. Like, right, really you should probably be splitting those up because of, they would have different intents. People who are looking for coats aren't looking for jackets and that kind of stuff. And they're like, we don't have room on the menu for coats and jackets as separate items because it's a big menu with lots of other stuff going on. And the fact that I kind of understood that perspective, because I have learned from the designers here at Candour in my previous jobs as well, understanding the limitations of a CMS, the understanding of what is actually possible on this particular domain, on this particular site, helped me be like, okay, yeah, we'll find a compromise there, we'll make it work, we'll understand it better. And I think you're totally right with the job titles, Marco. I found it fascinating when I saw other agencies had like 10 SEO managers, and I was like, what does that mean? How does that work? It's like, oh, right, you are an account lead, essentially. You are doing the majority of the work. You are driving the strategy and all that kind of stuff. But do you actually manage anybody? Like, I always see management as a people thing, like that. That's describing the hierarchy of the structure, right? So if you're a manager, you probably have people who work within your team who you then instruct and advise and all that kind of. You have your unit, exactly. But you're totally right. You would see then, I don't know, like we were joking earlier about the guru thing, right? Like, oh, you get 10 SEO managers who then work for the organic guru, and you're like, what the hell does that mean? What are you talking about? And I think because I know it's been an industry that's been around nearly 30 years at this point, because we're a relatively fresh industry when it comes to websites and the internet and digital marketing and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people just kind of make it up as they go along, and a lot of people will like accidentally start their own companies. Like, oh, I started off as freelance, and then I hired a couple of people, and then 5 years later it's an agency of 30 people or whatever it is, and you suddenly realize, okay, what do I call you? If you've been here for 5 years and you're reporting to that person, how do you then cross those streams and understand all that stuff? And they just start making up titles, and there's far less structure in like definitive. For example, my wife worked at the hospital for many years. She was a nurse. There is literally numbers to your like seniority. In the UK, you literally go like band 1, band 2, band 3, band 4. My wife was a band 6, which is like ward manager essentially. She then reports to the head of department, who is a band 7, and it goes up and up and up. There is no confusing who is who or how you work or who reports to who. You literally have numbers. I am a level 5 SEO. Marco is a level 6 SEO. I report to Marco because you're above me. Like, there was no confusion there. Whereas with SEO and
Yeah.
websites and digital marketing, we kind of just make it up. Like, I don't know, am I a 6.5 or a 7? Who knows? Like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, yeah, it's much more structured. But to be honest, it's the same with data. And data went through much more hype because of big data, AI, crypto, NFTs, whatever.
Oh yeah. As soon as there's
Compared
money
to-
involved.
Yeah, compared to SEO, I think there was much more hype. Now it's very structured, I would say. Now roles are clearly distinguished, at least for me, because when I started university, I was doing my master's thesis, and I was like, okay, what is the difference between data mining, analytics, and this one? And papers had different had different definitions, completely different. I wasn't understanding it. Now it's much more clear how to call things, which is good in my opinion. Of course, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, it's much more structured for obvious reasons. They are different
That's
as
quite
well.
important.
It's quite important.
Literal life and death.
Yeah, it's quite important.
I'd always joke about that with my wife. Like, if I have a terrible day at work, it's like, yeah,
I recall.
traffic was down 30% or whatever. I was like, my wife would be like, 3 people died today. It was okay. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that puts everything into perspective.
I think you made a post and people got salty, right?
Probably, yeah. That might be me. Yeah.
I recall. No, but it's true. These jobs are new. I mean, they don't have 1,000 years. They are new.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. Nursing has been around for forever. As long as people have been making things to heal wounds and stuff, there has been a person doing nursing.
Yeah, back then you also had shamans and charlatans.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Even if it wasn't literally called a nurse, you still had community healers and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas I don't know how many kind of like, prehistoric marketers there were. How many data analysts in the Ice Age?
Actually, this is interesting because, I wanted to say that in data, now there is a clear cut, in my opinion. From what I see, there is a clear cut. And there are new positions being created as we speak or being defined. And some of them I like. For example, data analyst is usually associated with I don't agree, but it's usually associated with a lower level compared to an engineer. They are different positions. They do different things, but there is this stereotype from back then. Even though they are different and they don't do the same things, you don't evolve into an engineer.
Yeah, it's not a straight line, right?
No, it's not straight.
Branching paths, yeah.
You can switch into an engineer. You don't evolve. Usually you don't evolve. They're different. I prefer the wording decision scientist because it's actually more precise. Decision scientist or decision whatever. It's actually more precise and you get paid more in theory because it's cool. I don't know why it's cooler. But I think the problem of SEO data and these new industries are about the titles, labels, and the task. For example, product SEO. Product SEO was not a thing until some years ago. Product analytics as well. Product analytics is also something relatively new. It's not something that existed 20 years ago. At least I don't recall at all. Now you have new concepts. You have new, like the meta game. It's evolving. You have new things, new concepts that are taking foot, and they're actually quite important, in my opinion, because from what I see, they actually help me to define what I do, how I can add value. And compared to SEO and marketing, I think that many people, especially in SEO, have to focus more on this aspect of the adding value and business, meaning that SEO, and I want to say the usual stuff that everyone says, SEO is not only Google, because we know, come on, we are adults. I think people listening to this already know. I wanted to say that I prefer the wording inbound or organic because usually you can have something with a short feedback loop, or for sure short, or social media have a shorter feedback loop compared to organic. I mean, it's true. So you can add easier value, and it's also easier to talk about some important concepts like content distribution and repurposing, this is also a new concept. It's not new because people have always done that. Now it's documented. In the last few years, content operations management have become a discipline, we can say, more documented, accepted. Before, people were doing that, but they were not calling it distribution or repurposing. Now it's more structured. it's easier to apply these concepts. It's easier to apply to talk about events in GA4. It's easier to talk about data if you have a wider lens. Because I told you, you cannot evaluate SEO or any other channel separately. Okay, maybe email we can discuss. Maybe, because that's more for conversions. But if you are doing SEO, social media, you may have some interactions, SEO and paid as well. You cannot ignore paid, or you cannot say, okay, SEO is not important because we pay for ads. It's, in my opinion, it's not a very wise idea. Usually you need this not multi-channel, but the omni-channel approach where you are able to combine the two. And usually it involves having this underlying logic where you can say, okay, I am an SEO or I am a PPC expert or whatever you are, but I also know something about other channels to combine them and to have this, gestalt, this union, this synthesis where I'm able to combine the two things and say we can add value in this way. For example, if I have to write article, I don't know, let's say Mayo Clinic, let's take a random example. You don't just think about the website, you think about the channels. How can we, from this blog post, start and create 5 tips for social media? How can we, nurture and give energy to this content machine? And this approach cannot be done only with social media or only with SEO. By definition, you need more channels, and this reflects on data. Because if I have to analyze your data, they need context. And if the context is missing, if you have GSC data and GA4 data is mid, you only have basic events that don't make sense for the business because you're not capturing what I tell you, then I cannot do my analysis. I cannot give you add value. Then we can discuss who is the person responsible for this. In my opinion, it should be both. Like what I usually do is that I tell people or SEO to do this. I'm the one telling them because I have a background in SEO and content. And that's why I think, which is in line with what the industry thinks actually, it's quite a mainstream opinion, that if you work in data or if you work with data, you must be a domain expert. If you are a biostatistician, you must know biology. Even though statistics is different, it's the same idea. If you work with banks, you should know how a bank is making money or how it works. If you analyze SEO and PPC data, you must have some experience in SEO and PPC. Why should I trust you if you don't have experience in SEO and you analyze SEO data? No, you should be both. It's easy for someone with an SEO background to learn analytics. That's why I have a course. It's easy for them. If you have a technical background, I mean, you can also do it, of course, but it's not really the same thing. Usually, if you have a background, or if you're a business analyst, or if you work in business, in accounting, it's easier to learn data. In SEO, it's the same. You are used to Google Sheets, you're used to use the APIs. Learning some more additional knowledge will only benefit you. It's not a big issue. But if you just work with data, go explain someone SEO from scratch. It's very hard, to be honest. Explaining to new people SEO, I tried it. It's impossible because I'm like, yes, but why then Google is doing that? Why do you have this metric and not that one? And you have to explain the whole history.
So in the 1990s, right, you need to go through it. So there was Larry Page and God News, like the whole history of search engines and the concepts of the internet and stuff. Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but also the website types. You cannot compare a publisher to an e-commerce and tell me they are the same thing because they are not. I don't know anything about B2B SaaS. I know some stuff. I know that they have to measure leads. MQL, SQL, of course I know. But I'm not an expert in growth drivers or this stuff because it's completely different how they make money, how they work, and so on. This is an important distinction when you analyze data, what you're analyzing.
Yeah, like you said, that having that basic understanding, I think, is important so you can be aware of what people are talking about in that specialized industry. But being a specialist and understanding where your limitations are is hugely important as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect way to wrap us up, because you mentioned your course, Marco. Of course, you have a fantastic newsletter, which I'm already a subscriber of, by the way.
I didn't know. Thank you.
If people want to follow you, going to check out your newsletter, check out your Analytics for SEO course or book or anything like that, where is the best place to find you and follow everything you do in analytics?
Either the newsletter or LinkedIn. To be honest, it's where I post now. The newsletter, of course, I usually have a summary of what I do during the week, the most important articles. The website as well, the website seotistics.com, SEO plus statistics, even though now it's web analytics. I don't want to change the name. It's super cool. I keep it, but it's more about web analytics. So yeah, one of these three works fine.
Awesome. I will put links for everything down below, whether you're watching or listening. They'll be in the show notes. So you can go and follow Marco, go and check out his newsletter, go and check out the courses he's doing, because you're doing awesome work, Marco. I thank you for coming along, joining me on this podcast, and doing the fantastic work you're doing.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Like I said, I think that was a really interesting conversation all about web data with Marco. Thank you to Marco for joining me as always. It's been an amazing run of guests, if I do say so myself. There have been some fantastic and really, really interesting topics, really brilliant conversations. I feel like I'm learning a lot in the last few months or so, let alone the whole year that we've been doing this on YouTube, and let alone the 2.5 years I've now been doing the show, because we're coming up towards the end of the year. We're going to have our essentially podcast wrapped episode. I'll do a solo episode where I will talk about it and I'll get involved and I will kind of run down the top episodes of the year and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that. Of course, before that, Mark and I will be back in the studio recapping all the important SEO news from throughout November. And towards the end, right at the end of the year, we'll be doing predictions for 2025. I'll do another panel, again, like I did last year with Arnaut and BB and Crystal, and we'll do some brilliant things and interesting things planning 2025, because I've got big plans for 2025. Mark and I were just talking about some cool ideas for new recordings, new ideas, new episodes, all this kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that in 2025. In the meantime, I'll still have amazing guests, still have fantastic interviews, of course. And if I didn't already see you in Barcelona, hopefully I will see you at a conference in 2025, because I'm planning to do a bit more traveling and travel around a bit more and do more conferences in 2025 as well. So if I haven't already seen you in person, you haven't been on the show before, I look forward to saying hello to you either online or in person. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.